Do you enjoy D&D 5th edition, but at heart, really what you want to tell is a nice, good Tolkien story? Like you love Lord of the Rings and that universe, and you just wish that you could do your role-playing games in that world? Well, now you can. Hi, I'm Chris Brenshaw, and today I'm going to be looking at Adventures in Middle-earth, the Player's Guide. This is put out by Cubicle 7, and what this is a licensed version of D&D 5th edition that is set in Middle-earth. So you can run all sorts of games in that same sort of world, but using a very familiar and very popular role-playing game system. Adventures in Middle-earth takes place in between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. So it's a great time to set a bunch of adventurers out on a quest to complete. So the rulebook itself does not contain a lot of the D&D rules. So if you don't know D&D, you're gonna have to read up on how to play. Either you can look online at some of the OGL, the Open Gaming License, and some of the quick start guides that are out for free, or pick up the D&D Player's Handbook for going along, because this definitely assumes that you're familiar with the D&D 5th edition rule set. So this is almost more of a source book, but not quite. We start off, I'm just gonna kind of go through and let you know what is inside here. If it doesn't really tell you the rules as far as 5th edition, how does it go about? So it starts off with a little bit of setting and letting you know where all the different places in Middle-earth are. So if you're vaguely familiar with the setting, it gets you a little bit more in tune with what these different places that the game is set in and the places that you can go to on your adventures. It gets into how do I create a character? So there's not as much, because this is a different sort of fantasy game, there's not a whole lot of non-human races in here. Like instead of calling them races, they're called cultures instead. And that's because you're not just making a human. You're not just making a dwarf or an elf. You're making a specific human, as in, you know, the Bardings or Bjornings, you know, or there's also the Dundane, and you've got the dwarves of the Lonely Mountain. You've got the elves of Mirkwood, and then you've got, like, obviously Men of Bree, you've got hobbits and that sort of thing in here as well. But it's different, you know, men of Minas Tirith, you know, it's different sorts of settings, and each one has stats and abilities changed by that are relevant to their story at all. So caveat, I'm not as familiar with Tolkien as a lot of other people are, so if I say something wrong, please forgive me. I've read the books, I've seen the movies. After that, we move into your classes, which are definitely different from the 5e classes, and of course it breaks down into what features you get and everything. But you have your scholar, which is not so much a wizard, but more of your healer kind of thing. It's kind of like a wizard, but without all the offensive magic kind of piece. The only sort of magic that's in this game is healing magic and that sort of thing. And then, of course, you've got your Slayer, which would be more of like your barbarian in D&D, where you're just, super aggressive, I'm gonna take out everything, brah. And you've got your Treasure Hunter, which is your rogue, you know, your sly person that's going behind the scenes and trying to get things exactly the way they want and slip out before anyone notices. And you've got your Wanderer. Your Wanderer is your ranger, you know, ranged attacks, wandering through the woods, very good at nature, knowing their environment and their surroundings. And then you've got the Warden. The Warden's kind of like a bard and a fighter put together. It's all about like getting everyone riled up and getting everyone on the same page and helping them take out the enemy. And then finally you get your Warrior, which is like your generic fighter. It's just all around, I'm sweet and I know how to kill everything, sort of thing. Just like in D&D, you've got your different backgrounds for each and archetypes in each one of these different classes. And then you've got virtues, which are kind of like feats in D&D, which are hardly ever used, but basically on any of the times that you can get an upgrade in your ability check, you can get one of these virtues instead, which help modify your character and make them even more specialized and unique from other characters of the same type or same culture and class. such as expertise, swordmaster, kingsman, fierce shot, brothers to bears, night goer, skin coat. And there's all sorts of, the book is really great in its presentation, is that there's all sorts of, around the borders, there's the different, like the scripts of some of the different languages, and it just definitely, you get a very Middle-earth feel by reading through this book. After that, you've got your backgrounds, which is just like in D&D, that helps add some more flavor and bits to your character. I'm not going to go into that one a whole lot. After you get through equipment and that sort of thing, you start to get to where the meat of the game really is. And this is what sets this game apart from other generic D&D sort of games. And the first piece is your journeys. Now, when you've talked about games in the past and you've run games and you've got like, oh, the players want to go from here to here, typically you do one of two things. You either just do some filling bits of story about what happened and then poof, you're there at the next place. Or you try and put in some adventures like, oh, you're walking, oh, roll a die, oh, this happens, and that sort of thing. So there's usually, I haven't seen a really good way of how to deal with this travel time sort of aspect of these sort of stories, because it's not an instant thing. Something did happen on the way there. And the system that's provided in here is really interesting because, as anyone that's read the books knows, that the journey is a large portion of these quests because they will change the characters. Story bits will happen. The characters will not be the same person when they left when they arrive. They've seen some stuff. So the game starts off with a step, it's an embarkation where you describe how you're going to get there, what path you're going to take, and then your lore master, that's just the GM in this game, determines how hard a trip that's going to be based on where you're going to go, what sort of terrain you're going to be walking through. And then they'll roll a check to see how does your overall journey going to be like? Are there going to be any massive penalties or bonuses that you get on this trip? Then you'll get into different events that will happen on the way, and there's a table here that rolls, it's up to 12, and all sorts of different events will happen. Most of them non-combat related. Most of them are some sort of skill interaction that the players will have to interact with and help further the story. And then finally, when they reach their destination, there'll be another arrival roll which determines how have the characters changed. What is their temperament now that they arrive? Are they exhausted and weary? Or are they pepped up and excited and ready to keep going? The next big thing that's in this book actually has to deal almost with alignment, in that instead of having your chaotic neutral, your lawful evil, your neutral good, and all those, the standard 9-point alignments grid, this takes it in a completely different way that I think is actually really kind of cool. And that's called the shadow. And that anytime your characters experience something that would corrupt their soul, whether that's experiencing a distressful event, whether that's crossing an area that's a manifestation of the shadow, which is the overall evil in this game, committing some sort of despicable or dishonorable deed, or taking possession of a cursed item, you get shadow points of shadow that build up inside of you. And if you ever go above your wisdom score with shadow points, then you have a chance of going into madness, where you basically have to turn, the GM takes control of your character for a while and all sorts of bad things happen. You also get story penalties where you'll get traits that get applied to your character that sort of show how that corruption has impacted your character, and it may affect interactions with other characters in the environment in future games. And in fact, if you do it too much, which this is not something that would happen very quickly because it would definitely take a while, but if you build up corruption over and over and over and over and over and over again to where you're like only doing terrible things all the time, then eventually your character gets so corrupted, they're torn into madness, and they either run away and are no longer player controlled, or they end up succumbing to madness and probably killing themselves. So it's a definitely interesting take, and that it handles the whole alignment system that a lot of people have had vague things about, by just throwing it away entirely and building and constructing a new system, which I think this sort of whole treating it, the morality as a kind of corruption of the soul piece, is a very interesting and unique take on it that I think is really, really cool. And then the last bit of the book is just to help for those that may not be as familiar as to all these different factions and how these cultures interact with each other. There's rules and guidelines in this book for how different groups interact with each other, and how if you want to have an audience with that group, you've arrived in a town and you want to set up shop and rest for a little bit, or you need to consult with the leaders, how, because of what you are, that will change how the default assumptions those people will have against you, and how you can help turn those in your favor and make them more friendly to you. So it's a really kind of neat thing. And then the last thing that's in here is called the fellowship phase, which is another thing that's not really handled very well in a lot of other books, which is, okay, your story's ended. You may not necessarily pick up the next adventure right away. Some passage of time happens, so it's sort of like a little narrative. It's not a very long phase. It's just something that's supposed to be the very end of your session. You wrap up, and then for maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes. Oh, so over the next couple of months, years, days, whatever it is until your next adventure, what's your character doing? Are they learning a new skill? Did they go home and sit with their family and their loved ones and that sort of thing? Did they work towards being, helping out this town in its need, like, helping out the neighbors and the people and building up a reputation for themselves? Did they develop a title and get a plot of land generated to them for all the heroic deeds they've done? A lot of really cool ways that help builds that dynamic and builds that story in between just, oh, we finished this quest, it's time to go to the next quest. So that is everything that's included in the Player's Guide to Adventures in Middle-earth. But what do I think about the game? I am really intrigued by this game. I don't think I could ever run this game, primarily in the same way that I usually have trouble running any sort of IP-related game, such as Star Wars and anything, is that most of these, I don't know the lore that well, and usually I'm always playing with people that know more than I do, and I never like being in that position because I'm always afraid I'm going to screw something up. So I would definitely play in this game, though. I definitely want to see, between some of the journey stuff and the shadow corruption, there's a lot of cool systems that I'd like to test out and tweak for myself. Because I have a feeling some of the things with the journey stuff, games that you would play long amounts of time, like if you played this over the course of a couple of years, I feel like some of the roles would get kind of repetitive and some of the journeys might get a little stale. And now, granted, there are source books that could come out that could help build upon that, but I'm just kind of curious how the base game itself, how long and repetitive, or how long it would take before that got really repetitive. But I will have to say, it's an excellent book. It's an excellent production. It's a great looking thing. And if you're a Tolkien fan at all, I think you need this book. I really do. It takes that kind of spirit of the movies and the books and really wraps it into, takes the D&D the D&D rule set, wraps it around a Tolkien blanket, and just makes it feel all nice and cozy. So if you're a fan of Tolkien at all, you should go to your local game store, go online, and pick yourself up a copy of Adventures in Middle-earth Player's Guide. So if you tried Adventures in Middle-earth, what have you liked or disliked about the game? Let me know down in the comments below. Or what intrigued you about this game? And I'll answer any questions that you might have down in the comments below. So also make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can make sure to stay in the loop about any other sort of books and games and stuff that I'm going to be reviewing. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.